The reason it's important is for many years, a lot of us who are in Bitcoin have been saying, how come more companies aren't acquiring Bitcoin? Well, now they're going to start doing that. We know some people who are lobbyists that represent different industries, and some of them have said, what's happening with Bitcoin at the federal level is very similar to what happened in the cannabis industry, in that you have all these different states that are saying, yeah, we love Bitcoin. We don't really care what Washington says. We're going to embrace it. We're going to welcome miners. We're going to welcome Bitcoin industries. And other states like New York, Washington State, California, that say, we don't want anything to do with these people. We don't want them in our state. It's pretty darn clear that they are not, those businesses are not welcome. We actually had a conversation with one of the ETF issuers, which I won't name, a couple months before the ETFs were approved. They didn't even have sales collateral yet. They didn't have anything yet because they didn't know if it was going to happen. So it's going to take a while, but RIAs, these independent financial advisors, are a huge part of the financial system across the country. I mean, there's probably 1,000 here in Naples, might even be more. And most of them have relationships with all the big funds up in DC, BlackRock, Fidelity. Now, there's one outlier, which you guys might know about, which is Vanguard. They will not offer Bitcoin. The CEO left. No, he wasn't fired. He resigned. He retired. And the guy that replaced him headed up the Bitcoin ETF offering for BlackRock. I'm really happy to be here. I'll probably have to leave about 8:30 or so because I got 2.5 hours home.
I woke up at 8
Yeah,
for the interview.
that's totally fine. Just a precursor, anything I say tonight, personal opinions, not the position of the Digital Chamber, and anything I'm saying is not financial advice. I used to be the head of marketing for the Chamber, and I've been involved with them for about 5 years. The Digital Chamber is 10 years old. It's based in Washington, D.C. I live in Pompano. Many of us are sort of distributed. They are the first and largest trade organization that represents the industry for digital assets. So I might wish it was Bitcoin only, but we also represent companies all over the industry. So our members, we're kind of like the Chamber of Commerce for the digital asset industry. So we represent law firms, accounting firms, companies that are in the industry, everything from exchanges to tax guidance folks. Anybody you can imagine in the digital asset industry is a member of the Chamber, or those categories are members of the Chamber. Now, we do have a lot of companies that are very focused on Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin is the largest of all the digital assets and the most well-known, we spend a lot of time working on Bitcoin initiatives. So our remit is, well, our mission is to promote the use and adoption of digital assets in the United States. We do advocacy and education as well. But our real mission is to work with members of Congress, regulators, accounting firms, tax firms, people that kind of write the lobbying firms that write the drafts of legislation to create fair, transparent regulatory standards for the digital asset industry. So we work primarily at the federal level. We do work with certain states on things that are happening there. So we work a lot with the Texas Blockchain Association. We've done a lot in Illinois. We've done a good amount here with Sam in Florida. And that's really the mission of the Chamber, is we're kind of the intermediaries between the market and the politicians, if you will. So it's an interesting place to be. The Chamber's going to turn 10 years old in July. I've been there for about 5. I left for a while to become the COO of a Bitcoin mining company, and I came back as a consultant about 6 months ago. So I wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of an update on what's been happening, because a lot's happened in the past year. A lot's happened in the past 2 months. No, we're a nonprofit organization.
No.
Yeah. So, members. So we have over 200 members from across the industry spectrum. So those lobbying firms, accounting firms, lawyers, members of the industry. So a lot of the companies you all would know in the industry are members of the chamber. There's another group in Washington that's similar called the Blockchain Alliance. So we're kind of similar. We were started a few years before, and their focus is a little more on NFTs and things like that. Our focus is a little bit more on Bitcoin, digital assets themselves, and the Lightning Network and layer 2, layer 3 things that are happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So it's there's a lot going on at the federal level. And one of the things that's very interesting is we know some people who are lobbyists that represent different industries, and some of them have said what's happening with Bitcoin at the federal level is very similar to what happened in the cannabis industry, in that you have all these different states that are saying, yeah, we love Bitcoin. We don't really care what Washington says. We're going to embrace it. We're going to welcome miners. We're going to welcome Bitcoin industries. And other states like New York, Washington State, California, that say, we don't want anything to do with these people. We don't want them in our state. It's pretty darn clear that they are not, those businesses are not welcome. So we do some work at the state level, but most of our work is at the federal level. And the agencies that we work with most of them, but the large financial agencies and regulators that we work with are the SEC, of course, the CFTC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, underscore the word commodity. So the interesting thing about the CFTC is that they are very focused on Bitcoin. So they are the regulators. I'm going to wait till you sit down so I can see everybody. Okay. They are the regulators for the Bitcoin audience. If you are not a commodity, and the SEC they've been kind of shifty about Ethereum. They have come out, Gary Gensler has come out several times, Gary Gensler being the head of the SEC. Very, very, very important, very controversial person. Well, he can't be the enemy of the group because he's the head of the SEC. So there's a lot of opinions about Gensler. He's a very polarizing figure, but he is the head of the SEC, the most important financial regulatory association in America. So agree with him, don't agree with him, it really doesn't matter. Whoever's the head of the SEC is someone that we have to pay attention to as investors, but also as the chamber. So you have this SEC, CFTC. They've been basically having this turf war, if you will, because the CFTC is saying, okay, Gensler himself has come out and said Bitcoin is the only of all of these digital assets that is a commodity. So that means we, CFTC, regulate them. We are the Commodity Futures Trade Commission. So there's a bit of a turf war there, but Bitcoin clearly falls under the regulatory authority of the CFTC. Gary Gensler, he's the head of the SEC. So that is one of the most important positions in the government and on the financial side, for sure. So you have kind of Treasury, and you have the SEC, and you have the Fed. Those are probably the three most powerful financial regulatory authorities in the United States. And I'll take a step back. The Treasury Secretary is Janet Yellen. The head of the SEC is Gary Gensler. And of course, Jay Powell is the head of the Fed. So there's a third regulatory agency called FASB. And they basically are the agency, they're the Financial Accounting Standards Bureau. They kind of deal with everything that has to do with the accounting practices and how do you account for digital assets? Where in a ledger do they sit? What kind of accounting practices do they need to follow in order to be regulated and have some oversight? FASB has become very, very important because they are a lot of people have been asking for many years now, how come more companies are not buying Bitcoin like MicroStrategy does? Are you guys all familiar with MicroStrategy? Is anybody in the room? Okay. If I'm talking about stuff you don't understand, just raise your hand and say, I don't get it. Like, sorry, That's fine. That's totally fine. That is literally why I drove 5 hours back and forth to be here to meet with people like you. This is where the rubber hits the road, in rooms like this. FASB, being the accounting oversight, they recently had a very, very important decision that came down. For a couple of years now, MicroStrategy, which is a very large technology company based in Virginia, run by a guy named Michael Saylor, they have been acquiring Bitcoin as a company and putting it on their corporate balance sheet. So it's an asset, just like anything else is, like the building they own, or the cash that they have in the bank, or any other ancillary investments they might have. And the value of MicroStrategy has gone from about $85 when they started this to it almost hit $1,000 at one point about 2 years ago. So a lot of other companies started looking at this and saying, okay, well, we might want to consider this too. But MicroStrategy had to go through a lot of extremely difficult accounting procedures just to put this on their balance sheet. It was really difficult. And they took a huge risk because what they did was, there's something called mark-to-market accounting. Does anybody in the room know what mark-to-market accounting is? I'm not an accountant. Okay. Basically, what it means is when you acquire an asset as a company and you put it on your balance sheet, you can account for it at the market price, right? That means when it goes down, you get credit for the loss, and when it goes up, you get taxed on the gain. Well, that wasn't applied to Bitcoin. So MicroStrategy, when they started buying, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. There was no mark-to-market accounting that was available to the industry. We didn't qualify for it. It was too new. The asset was just too new. So MicroStrategy got taxed every time Bitcoin went up, but when it went down, they couldn't defer the loss. So it was a very difficult investment for them to make, but they believed in it, so they did it. So the chamber got together with Mike Saylor and some of the other folks in our accounting group, and for about 4 years, ourselves and others lobbied very hard for FASB to create accounting rules so that there was mark-to-market accounting that qualified for Bitcoin, so that people wouldn't put it on their balance sheets. Businesses would use it as an asset that they could put on their balance sheet, because now they could get taxed on the gain. That's fine. They're a business. They're used to that. But now they could also take the loss. So that happened about 8 months ago. And starting in January 25, next January, corporations will legally be able to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets. So,
1 second, usually you pay on the gain when you cash it.
correct. Now, it depends on whether it's recognized revenue or not recognized revenue. So it depends upon how they do their quarterly financial statements. Every company's different, right? But
We're speaking.
yes, we're not talking about individuals. So, and I'll come to that in a second. But what this means, why it's important, because I'm not an accountant. I don't really care that much about accounting. That's why I have an accountant. But the reason it's important is, for many years, a lot of us who are in Bitcoin have been saying, how come more companies aren't acquiring Bitcoin? Well, now they're going to start doing that. So we work with a lot of these large companies who we know, because we talk to them all the time at the chamber, are spending this year preparing for this. What do we need to do with our accounting practices so that we will be able to acquire Bitcoin in 2025? So are we sure that that's going to happen? No. But if it does, even at a small level, that could have a very fundamental impact on Bitcoin adoption. Because you can imagine IBM or Apple or somebody like that acquiring a couple thousand Bitcoin. I mean, it's significant. And all these CEOs around the country, everybody was talking about MicroStrategy the last year or two, saying, who is this company? Some tech company in Virginia whose revenue, I think, was about $400 million. Now they're worth billions of dollars because they acquired all this Bitcoin. Oh yeah, I've met him a few times. He's a very brilliant guy. So there's a lot happening on the corporate side. This gentleman just mentioned that we just had, we think there are others, but the first publicly announced pension fund, we think that there are, but we're not sure. Wisconsin announced last week that they became the first state to invest in Bitcoin through their state pension fund. So if you're a state employee in Wisconsin and you have the pension fund, like a teacher or something, that state pension fund now has Bitcoin as an investment in there, along with stocks and bonds and whatever else they have. So this is sort of what we call the institutional adoption of Bitcoin, right? Companies, pension funds, family offices, high net worth individuals, things like that. So that's sort of one bucket, right? And that was able to happen because organizations like the Chamber, the Blockchain Association, other lobbyists, all kind of banded together and really supported that. It took over 4 years. So one of the things that I think we all know conceptually, I didn't really get until I started working at the Chamber and with the Chamber, is that the wheels of legislation, I've been in the tech world for many years, and I've worked with a lot of startups where everything moves really fast. It is like, it's not even like watching paint dry. It's so slow. It's beyond words how slowly things move. So it's a patience thing, and it's a, then you get an election and Congress changes over, and those 10 advocates that you had, 4 of them got voted out. So you got to start all over again. And so it teaches one some patience. But that was a big thing. The other big thing that happened that we're all aware of is the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF. And that was driven by Fidelity, BlackRock, Wisdom Tree, Van Eck, largest Cathie Wood at ARK. Is anybody, are you guys familiar with Cathie Wood? If you don't follow her, you might also want to follow her. She was a big advocate for it. And what that did was it brought Wall Street in. So as I'm sure you guys have read, for Fidelity and BlackRock, which are the largest of the ETF issuers now, it's been the most successful ETF they've ever issued. And I read somewhere, I think it was Bloomberg yesterday, that between the top 8, I think it was, it's the most money that's come into an ETF ever. That's astonishing. And there are hundreds and hundreds of ETFs. So, they're all jockeying now too, right? So you've got all of these institutions in Wall Street now coming in as well. And that the trickle down effect of that is they are now going out to all their RIAs, their advisors, and saying, we really want you to encourage your clients to invest in the BlackRock, Fidelity, ETF, whoever they have a license with. Do people in this room go to independent financial advisors? Does anybody have an independent financial advisor? Okay. So they're the ones that it's a slow rollout. It's not going to happen in 3 months. It's interesting. Yes. And it'll take a while. We actually had a conversation with one of the ETF issuers, which I won't name, a couple months before the ETFs were approved. They didn't even have sales collateral yet. They didn't have anything yet because they didn't know if it was going to happen. So it's going to take a while. But RIAs, these independent financial advisors, are a huge part of the financial system across the country. I mean, there's probably 1,000 here in Naples, might even be more. And most of them have relationships with all the big funds up in DC, BlackRock, Fidelity. Now, there's one outlier, which you guys might know about, which is Vanguard. They will not offer Bitcoin. The CEO left. No, he wasn't fired. He resigned. He retired. He retired. And the guy that replaced him headed up the Bitcoin ETF offering for BlackRock. And he has now come out publicly in the past 2 weeks and said they will not offer the Bitcoin ETF right now. They don't think that their investors want it. They're just not ready. Well, those of us in this room laugh about that and say they're crazy. But we have to remember, we are very, very early. We are so early. Which, if you're interested, I probably should start with this. How did I get into this? Why am I here? I spent my career as a journalist at CBS in New York, and then I went into public relations, and I worked for these big, huge PR firms all over the world. So I lived in China, I lived in Hong Kong for about 6 years. And I was in Hong Kong, and I would speak to these students on the weekends and just, classes and stuff like that. And after one of my classes, these they asked me to speak to some engineering students about how to talk about technology in ways that were understandable to real people. And these 4 guys came up to me and said, "You seem like you're really interested in new things and things that no one's ever heard of. And have you heard of the Bitcoin?" And I said, "No." This was in 2013. And they handed me this white paper, this law. And it's a Saturday, and I'm thinking, I'm going on a trail run today. I want to read this white paper. And they said, just read it. And next time when you come back in 2 weeks, can we talk about it? And I said, okay. So I kind of forgot about it. And about a week later, it was raining or something one night. And I started reading it. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. So I kind of, was intrigued. And I went back to the school. And they ended up saying, well, let us read the paper together. So we started to read the white paper together. And we would try to figure it out. And on the internet, looking up these terms and everything. So that's how I got into Bitcoin. And when I left Asia, I came back and I was living in New York. I started going to all the meetups, and there was a pretty active Bitcoin meetup group in New York in like 2014, 15. I'm sure they still are. And just an observation, it's so nice to see at least half this room women, because I was always like me, maybe one other woman in the room, and usually the only non-engineer. But, that's how it starts. And we are still so early that.
70,000 late.
What's that?
We're 70,000 late.
Oh, God, no. I mean, I forget, that so many of my friends still don't have it. They're still kind of nervous, or for whatever reason. I don't push my friends. I don't talk to them about it. They all know what industry I work in. I've been in this industry working in it now for 5 years. I was an investor, early, but it's still really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And the biggest feedback that I get and that we get at the chamber is it's too volatile. What if the government tries to seize it? I don't understand what's behind it. And these are all perfectly legitimate concerns. And taxing, but
One of my things.
yeah, and taxing to me is an easy question to answer. It's the same as real estate.
But depending on the government, they can say, okay, all Bitcoiners are going to be paying 50% tax. They can easily do that.
Well, they can't easily do that because they'd have to go through an army of lobbyists. They'd have to go through all those Wall Street ETF providers now, and they'd have to go through places like the chamber. And I give all credit to my friends who work at the chamber and the woman who founded it. That ain't easy.
Well, that's true, and I think
and it's very difficult to change the tax code when you hang on. Let me just finish. Because we fall under the CFTC, it'd be very difficult to change. It would be almost impossible to change the tax code for one commodity and not all the rest of them.
And I agree with that after the ETF.
Yeah.
Before the ETF, it was a big question mark for everybody.
Yeah, it still would have been hard because you would have had to single out one commodity and keep everything else the same. And that would have been really difficult. I mean, one of the things that does happen with this stuff in DC is sometimes the slow speed of change is the speed of Congress. And sometimes it's when they've tried to do things that are really harmful to the industry, Chamber, Blockchain Association, all these lobbyist groups, we sue. And we can keep this stuff in court for a long time to prevent it if we need to. Now, that's not anyone's preferred route, but that's happened before. So in any event, the accounting standards are really important. And what these organizations do is, we try as best we can. What we're asking for is just fair regulatory environment. When I first got involved in the industry a long time ago, like when I came back from Hong Kong, I would go to these meetups and I would say 3/4 of the people in the room were anarchists. I've been a registered libertarian for 20 years, although I just changed to an independent after the last libertarian convention, which was a disaster, in my opinion. But I believe in libertarian principles. But you'd have these people showing up. We got to overthrow the SEC and all. I mean, this went on for a long time. And so you have to understand that that's a part of this. There are a lot of us in this industry for different reasons, but I think one reason is because we do believe that we should be able to hold custody of our own wealth and our own assets. And we take the risks. If I buy a house, I own it, I custody it. If it catches on fire and I don't have enough insurance, or I don't pay my mortgage or whatever, well, then they're going to take it away. But that's really what a lot of is behind a lot of what the industry movement has been about is we want regulations. We want oversight. We want to be treated just as every other financial asset, pristine financial asset are treated. We're not against that. Now, there are people out there that will still say, I'm adamantly against it. And, the government shouldn't have any insight or oversight into this. The truth is, where we are now in the evolution, those days are long gone. That's over. Wall Street's here. All kinds of other players are in the game now. And that's not even a question anymore. So what we're trying to do is create a level, fair, transparent regulatory environment, which will ease a lot of people's fears and concerns. Because, I can tell you that when I first started investing in Bitcoin, and, I couldn't even tell people because nobody knew what it was. And the few people that I would try to explain it to, including my own family who now own Bitcoin, said, are you okay? Like, what is this? Like, why don't you just buy lottery? I've heard everything. Why don't you just buy lottery tickets? One of my friends said, Jackie, if you have that much money and you don't know what to do with it, why don't you just give it to me? I've literally heard everything. And, you just have to, you either have conviction or you don't. So anyway, so the regulatory environment is very interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So on the tax one's easy. It's taxed just like another commodity, like real estate. 20% if it's a short-term gain, 15% if it's long-term hold. And that's pretty straightforward. Volatility is, I don't try to convince people. None of us really do. Like certainly people I know in the industry, we just state the facts. It is volatile. It's very, very new. I'm dating myself here, but I was in tech during the run up to the internet, prior to the internet boom. Amazon was unbelievably volatile. I mean, it was just insanity. A lot of these companies, that's not uncommon with new technologies, especially. So is it evening out? Yeah, if you look at the cycles, the volatility is starting to, but it's going to take us a few cycles. That's just the nature of the asset. And what we try to explain to people is, if you truly are interested, look at the long term. Look at the 10-year cycle. Look at the 11-year cycle, and you can see. And sometimes people will say, yeah, but still, why don't I just invest in the S&P? Well, you certainly can, but Bitcoin is the highest performing asset 11 of the last 13 years across every asset class. So if you buy it and hold it.
What do you think Mark Moss? He broke it down. Broke down all the markets, the S&P. And it's been trading at Bitcoin's 200% every year. Sarah thinks it's going to continue. He thinks it's going to be relevant numbers. But as this goes on, it's going to be less volatile, which is not good for me.
Well, that's the other thing. Right. Correct. Yeah. Right. Well, and I think, we all often say to friends and others, it's kind of what Warren Buffett talks about. You don't buy it for 2 years, you buy it for 20. And this is Michael Saylor's thing. I personally think the idea of don't ever sell your Bitcoin, it's like, why did I go through all this if I'm never going to sell any of it? But everybody's different, But volatility is also, if you are interested in risk assets, which if you own Bitcoin, you obviously have an appetite for a risk asset, that is where fortunes are made. The Rockefellers, all those people made their fortunes in the Depression. And I think it was either Rockefeller or it might have been later Buffett who said, you buy when there's blood in the streets. And so the only strategy I think a lot of us, and certainly I have, is hold it until you really want to sell it or until you need it. And some people might say, listen, I'm fine to sell it at $75,000. Some people might say, I'm not going to sell it unless and until we hit 500,000. And you get you buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve, sort of. And all of us in this room deserved lower Bitcoin prices than others will probably get, hopefully, 2 years from now, because we took an early risk and we educated ourselves. And the OGs who bought, I'm 1 year late to be an OG, which kind of pisses me off. But Max Kaiser and those guys who bought it in 2012, they deserve what they have because they spent a bunch of money and took an enormous risk. And so the volatility thing, I mean, it's basically, you got to hold it, right? There are a lot of people that trade and do day trading and stuff like that. That's kind of a different world. Like, we don't get involved in that at the chamber. We don't work with like day traders and day trading organizations, and we don't get involved in the meme coins and all that kind of stuff. So what was the third objection? What if the government tries to seize it? What if Mary Poppins comes back? I mean, I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. The government the government seized gold. Now, could they do that again? They can take houses on eminent domain. The government can do a lot. I lived in China. So they could do a lot if they want to. That's one reason why you want these organizations in DC that are there as advocates, protectors. We spend a lot of time educating members of Congress and their staff, a lot of time, because they still, they deal with all kinds of stuff. 1 hour they're trying to deal with what's going on in the Ukraine. The next hour, some group from the chamber comes in and wants to talk about digital assets. So you have to spend a lot of time. And will they seize Bitcoin? No one knows the answer to that. But that's one reason why so many organizations like Unchained and Swan and all these other groups are constantly saying, you want to hold your own keys. You want to self-custody. Do most people in this room self-custody?
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah. I wanted to just show everybody this website, casebitcoin.com.
Oh, I don't even know this.
Yeah, making the case for Bitcoin every day. So it's got lots of educational stuff, but it has all these charts in here, and you can create a chart like this is right, a 2-year chart comparing Bitcoin to gold, S&P, and long U.S. Treasury bonds, right? At the end of the 5 years, this 5-year time period, Bitcoin's up 121% compared to gold at 26%, compared to S&P.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There you go. There it goes.
And compare
1911.
Inflation's eating most
Right.
of the month.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of different.
Great.
You can put in these drop downs. You put in 8-year. Some of them have a 10,
Right.
20-year time frame. So you can make charts and copy them and use them in presentations. Or
That's called what again?
The
Case.
It's casebitcoin.com.
Great. Yet another thing I get to spend my evenings on. I go on these things and I'm like, this is why I only watch TV when it's sports or like the baking show.
Bitcoin is digital gold. Bitcoin is a breakthrough person. Bitcoin is censorship.
Okay.
Bitcoin is an asymmetric adjustment. Bitcoin is currency.
I love it.
Right?
So that's very cool. I'm going to look that up tomorrow. I think though, but when we talk about, the question about is the government going to seize Bitcoin? The few times I've been asked, I'm like, I don't know the answer to that any more than you do, but I hold my own keys. So I guess I'll have to have a voting accident. I don't know. But there are certain things that are just not knowable. What I will say is when it comes to the regulatory environment in Washington, even at the state level, and in general, when we go in and talk to a member of Congress, I spend a lot of time talking to the media because I was a journalist and a PR person. So I talk to a lot of producers and reporters and editors and stuff like that. And I don't go in to talk about the price. And that's something that kind of grates on a lot of us in the industry is you turn on CNBC or whatever it is, and it's all about the price. Price. Well, why are we all really in this? Now, do I like that the price is going up? Of course I do. But that's not why I got into this industry. I got into the industry because the money's broken. And who does that hurt the most? The middle class and the poor. Everybody else, they got 6 homes and 3 boats and some ponies or art or whatever they have. The rest of us are like, we got the stock market and maybe some bonds and inflation, da 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 da. And if you're not getting, well, what do they tell us inflation is? 3% or something, same thing. But of course, that doesn't include energy, food, or any of the things we actually need to live with. When you look at that, we all see the numbers, it's well above 10%. So if you're not performing 10% of the traditional markets, you're not ahead of inflation. And when we go in to talk to media or members of Congress or their staffs, what we talk about is why Bitcoin matters. And why it matters is because the system as it exists, fiat money, is broken. And the level of debt that we have, the level of interest that we're paying on our debt, which is now larger than the money that we pay on our debt every quarter is now larger than what we give to the Department of Defense. It's larger than every other outlay in the budget other than Social Security and Medicare. Debt is number 3. That is not sustainable. You cannot run a country like that. You cannot continue on as a culture. You can't repair your roads. You can't defend yourself. So the system's broken. And what we go in and say is, there is an alternative. There is a life raft. And we're not proposing that the US government throw out all the dollars and put Bitcoin 100% on the balance sheet. But what we're saying is, give us fair rules of the road so that people will be safe investing. Having these ETFs, and I know there are people that say, well, it's not real Bitcoin and all that stuff. But here's the deal. If you're your friends or somebody who just retired or is getting ready to retire, you don't want to invest in this thing and you got to go on Coinbase and try to figure this stuff out and holding your keys and these what? When you call Fidelity and say, oh, what is this thing? And they can explain it to you. Yeah, we can get you $1,000 worth of Bitcoin ETF right now. They trust Fidelity. They've been with them forever. They know that Fidelity is not going to be some, fly-by-night startup that's gone tomorrow. So the Bitcoin ETF was really important, if for nothing else, to bring regular people like us into the community. And our job now is to try to explain to people, this isn't just about the money. This is about one of the things we talk a lot about right now is saving in Bitcoin. If you save in Bitcoin, your values are going up. If you save in dollars, your values are programmed to go down. That's what 2% inflation is about.
So I agree with you.
Oh, no, they know that. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, no, a lot of them say that. And, there are certain people, members of Congress, who are very early supporters. Cynthia Lummis, probably the number one. She's a senator from Wyoming. I don't know where we would be without her, literally. She was the first person who stood up and said, yeah, we got to take this seriously, and bought it. And what we try to do at the Chamber, because we're nonpartisan, is take the politics out of it, right? Oddly, I don't know why I'm saying that, but I guess I expected the other side to embrace it. Republicans embraced it much faster, and still are, than Democrats. But we have a lot of Democrats now on board. And Ted Cruz was a very early Bitcoiner. He's mining Bitcoin now. He went out. He announced at our conference. The Chamber has a policy conference every year in D.C. We had 800 people up there about 2 weeks ago. 12 members of Congress. I think it was 5 senators. Someone who sits on the Fed Board of Governors. One of the CFTC commissioners. One of the SEC commissioners. So all these people. Cruz sits up there on the stage and says, you know what? I need to start mining Bitcoin. I got to run my own node. And he just announced last week he bought 3 Bitcoin miners and he's mining. So there are a number of people who are extremely aware. And I think they even know at this point, because even the media, every month when the inflation numbers come out, there are certain members of the media that say, but let's not forget, that doesn't include food, energy, and all these other categories. Basically, you know what they did recently? They took coffee out of the measurement because coffee spiked up a lot. So they don't want to actually measure inflation. Cocoa's going to come out probably next time. That'll probably come out next month. So those numbers are not real numbers if you're a person that lives in the real world, right? So we try to just explain why it matters to societies. why it matters to the next generation, why it matters to people who are facing retirement or want to buy a house or whatever and need a better savings vehicle that isn't literally programmed to debase, why the technology and the technology rails should put the United States in a leadership position. I mean, we developed the rails for the internet. Vint Cerf, an American citizen, is considered the founder of the internet. MIT was basically the institution that helped to create the internet. And are we going to cede this to Dubai, Singapore? Where? That's a lot of what the chamber goes in and talks to the members of Congress about is we are, IBM invented the first large-scale computers. Microsoft invented the personal computers and Apple and popularized that. Are we now, with the biggest sort of innovations that are coming out, going to say, oh, well, let Singapore have that? I sure hope not. So that's a lot of what we talk about is we want to continue to be the technology leader around the world. So I would say the atmosphere in Washington is far, far more receptive now than it was even 2 years ago. And we had 3 things that have happened in the last about 6 weeks that, frankly, I think surprised everyone in the industry. Us, everybody we know. We had the Congress on both sides vote on legislation that would allow banks to be custodians of Bitcoin. The House voted it through. It went to the Senate. Frankly, a lot of us thought, this probably ain't going to get by. Well, there was a lot of phone calls made, a lot of lobbying, a lot of activists and advocates, sending out the phone number, call Congress. They got inundated, the switchboards getting shut down, all this crazy stuff. And not only did the Senate pass it, Chuck Schumer, leading Democrat, this was the bill that would allow custody. No, this was SAB 121. There's 2 bills, SAB 121 and FIT 21. SAB 121 was the bill that would allow banks to custody Bitcoin. So Bank of America you could go to Bank of America and get Bitcoin, presumably, and they would hold it in your account, similar to the ETFs. So not only did the Senate pass it, they passed it almost veto proof. It was like 60 to 30 something. Chuck Schumer voted for it, which was that was a big, to the president, because after it was passed in the House and it was going to the Senate, President Biden said, I'm going to veto it. Yeah, right. If this passes, I will veto this. And we kind of thought as an industry, oh, forget it. Like, these Democrats are not going to go against him. Well, they did. It was pretty shocking. And Biden vetoed it last week. He was true to his word.
Waited a while, right? That
was he didn't. So the behind the scenes story here is that bill was passed by both houses. Now, McHenry, who was the lead sponsor of that bill, could have sent it that night to the president's office, and he would have had 10 days from the day that bill passed. He could sign it, he could veto it, or he could do what they call a pocket veto. I'm not a lawyer, but as it was explained to me, a pocket veto is basically where if the Congress is not in session that day, Biden could have just done nothing. He could have not signed it and not vetoed it, and it would have gone into law. If the Congress is in session, he has to take an action. And so the Congress was not going to be in session on that 10th day. So we were all like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What we found out was one member of Congress can go to the floor and say, basically, the session is now open, and just sit there for like a couple hours. And technically Congress is in session. That didn't happen. So what happened was that bill got passed. McHenry did not send it to Biden that night because there's a second bill called FIT 21. That bill has been in progress for years. It was started by several members of Congress, Tom Emmer and a bunch of other people. And Senator Lummis was instrumental, and Senator Gillibrand. And one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. That bill would have basically created regulatory standards for the digital asset industry. I don't want to get too technical, but a lot of this has to do with Bitcoin miners and software companies. What they were essentially saying is, if you're a Bitcoin miner or a node operator, or even potentially a software company, because you write code and you process transactions of any kind, you have to be regulated and you have to report every single transaction. Now, I worked at a Bitcoin mining company as a COO. You don't know those things. You can't possibly know that. The technology, you are by design not allowed to see all of that. So we had to go around and explain this to all these people. So that bill was coming up like the next week. So what happened was McHenry waited for the House to vote on that bill. They passed it overwhelmingly. Coincidentally or not, I think it was the next night, President Trump came out and said, I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I think it's great, and whatever the other things he said. So we all thought, okay, no way is the president going to veto that original bill, right? So that's when McHenry sent it to him. That's why it took those extra days. From then, it was 10 extra days, and the other day he vetoed it. What happens now? Well, FIT 21 still has to go to the Senate. That's been passed by the House. That's the rules of the road for digital assets. We really need that. SAB 121, which is the bank custody, right now, there are various organizations in DC weighing whether or not they're going to sue. There are congressmen and senators trying to figure out they can relaunch it, revote on it, just reopen it, represent it. We don't know what's going to happen with that quite yet. So
Can't they override a veto?
they can. I don't know that they have the votes to do it. So there's a lot of sort of jockeying going on in the background. I don't get super involved in that, but they're not dead. Our organization, the other Blockchain Association, a lot of the lobbyists have made it very clear this is definitely not over. We're not just going to lie down. So it's interesting.
The whole 21, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I really like it.
Well, it's important. And what's interesting about that is the banking lobby, which is huge in the United States. I mean, you can imagine all these banks, Bank of America, Chase, all these banks, they lobbied really hard for SAB 121 to be passed. And I remember talking with some of the attorneys at our organization and saying, well, so the banking lobby, I have to assume that few politicians want to tick them off. And Biden, being from Delaware, has very strong ties to the banking lobby. He's gotten donations, enormous amounts of donations from banking from over the years. So we thought, okay, he's not going to tick those guys off. But at the end of the day, what we know to be, well, what we believe quite strongly based on information we have to be true, the Biden policy on digital assets is being called by Elizabeth Warren. And she wants a central bank digital currency. She has been extremely upfront about that. She wants a CBDC. And we all thought, well, guess what? The night that SAB 121 was voted on in the Senate and Chuck Schumer voted for it, that was a huge signal. We thought, okay, I remember we had a big phone call that night. If Biden vetoes or doesn't veto, he's going to have to decide who does he want to upset less, Elizabeth Warren or Chuck Schumer? Because Schumer sponsors voted for it. She's wildly against it. I guess we have our answer.
But he's not going to go against the banks.
He already did. He vetoed SAB 121. The banking lobby pushed very hard for that. So he went against the banks. He absolutely did. That was one of the most surprising outcomes of that legislation. Yeah. Well, the bank lobby's very powerful. I mean, they contribute a lot of money to a lot of campaigns. Yeah. I mean, I think probably every member of Congress takes money from them. I don't know, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It's very interesting that a bunch of Wall Street people and, and again, it's politics, right? So as soon as he vetoed, what happened that night? President Trump comes out and says, oh, I'm going to accept campaign contributions in Bitcoin.
Right.
And basically saying, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know what a digital asset is and all this stuff. And now he's accepting lightning payments. I mean, they're taking this issue and running with it. Now, we've been asked many times, how many people in the United States own cryptocurrencies or digital assets? There are numbers anywhere from about 30 million to 50 million. It's very, very hard to determine because we don't know who's self-custodying. We don't know, but it's somewhere in those numbers. And that's a large voting block. So one of the things that a lot of these organizations, including ours, are going to be doing for the next 6 months is making sure that this is a very front and center issue during the elections. There are people who are single issue voters. You know, they'll only vote for candidates that support certain issues. We don't know how many of those are there for our industry, but what I can tell you from being around this industry for quite a while now, people in it, man, they are in it. It is no joke. The crypto army, the Bitcoin army is real. And I think it's going to be very interesting because you've got Ripple people here. Does everybody know what Ripple is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got the Ripple people here, and they have a very interesting offering, et cetera. And, you know, we've done some interesting things with them. But they also, one of the founders of Ripple privately funded the environmental attack on Bitcoin miners. He donated $5 million to Greenpeace. And as a former member of Greenpeace, I was very disappointed because they basically sold their souls to this guy. And they've been launching an all-out war on Bitcoin miners for years. But they're getting Ripple people, ETH people, Bitcoin people. Everybody's kind of all getting together now around the election and saying, if you care about digital assets of any kind, be careful who you vote for. So it'll be interesting to see if Biden pivots or digs in. We don't know, but it's a good time to be paying attention to what's happening in the industry. And as someone who was for a long time a libertarian, but found herself in a policy organization in Washington, it's a very interesting thing because you do learn that the government, has an awful lot of say over our behaviors, our purchases, our everything, our lives. And that's one of the things that I think so many of us appreciate about Bitcoin is that it is truly the only hard, pristine asset that you can custody and own on your own. So I hope this is helpful to you guys. Is it interesting?
Oh, very
But, watch the news, follow people who are, if you're a Twitter person, X, whatever they call it now, Bitcoin X Twitter community, or it's just insane. And it's great. I love it. But follow people like Cynthia Lummis and some of the other politicians. If you look at who she follows, she'll lead you to a lot of the other ones. Because I give these people a ton of credit. They're real fighters, and they've stuck their necks out there, and they're not backing down. She's been working with Kristen Gillibrand, who's a Democrat from New York, and Gillibrand took a lot of grief about this, and she's not backing down. They both spoke together at the chamber. They were on the stage together, and these are the kinds of people we need. And the last thing I'll say is, if you have an opportunity, two last things. Get involved in state actions. Florida has become a very Bitcoin-friendly state. Texas is a little less so. The attacks by the environmental community on the miners has worked a little bit in Texas. We have a couple very large miners being sued in Texas. And if it gets really contentious, those guys have said, listen, we'll just pack up and go to Dubai. And that's what we often tell members of Congress. These guys are literally going to pack up and go to other countries.
What's the basis?
The riot lawsuit is about a noise ordinance, that they're creating too much noise. Yeah. I don't know the details, but Bitcoin mining companies it produces a lot of heat and a lot of noise, but traditionally you're in industrial parks, so they have different noise levels. And I worked at a 50 megawatt facility, a fraction of the size of Riot, and we measured our noise output 3 times a day. You have to. That's standard procedure at this point. Well, apparently he will remain the candidate. This is what I've heard. The world is a very strange place for a lot of us, but he is. It'll be interesting. Our hope is that Biden comes around. We want both candidates. RFK is also very, very pro Bitcoin, very pro digital assets. He has 21 that he bought for all 7 of his children. He bought 3. So, Florida is also doing a lot of good things. It's very supportive of the industry. We've struggled with mining here because of the heat. But now they have miners that are called immersion rigs. The machines sit in water baths. So you can mine them. They're using them to mine them in Dubai and places like that. So you can mine in Florida. And our local state administrations have been quite friendly to Bitcoin companies and exchanges and stuff like that. So if you have an opportunity to get involved in the state, that's helpful. And that leads me to sort of the last thing I'd like to say is, to me, as much as I appreciate and enjoy working in DC, this is what really matters. These meetups. I would not be sitting here in this room if it was not for 4 20-year-olds in Hong Kong, literally. And everything that's happened in my life since. And so come to these meetups. Bring your friends to these meetups. Support these guys. They are busting their asses trying to get these meetups going and trying to get people here and, offer to speak. Go to your local library and say, can I give a little talk on Bitcoin? They'll let you. Town halls. We've got to support the local efforts because that's how the internet rolled out too. AOL helped a lot when they sent us all those CD-ROMs. Remember those? That helped. But I remember going to early internet meetups and, it was the same story, but we've got to be here at the grassroots local level. Sure. The first thing if somebody said, well, why does this matter? Because the money's broken. The fiat money system, every fiat money system that has ever existed in history has collapsed. And usually its average life is around 100 years, whether it's shells or, horse hides or pelts or different coins or silver. I read somewhere recently that in Spain, before the big wars, silver dollars were 100% silver. By the end of 2 to 3 decades of wars, silver dollars were 3% silver. That's exactly what's happening to our money. It's just being debased and debased and debased. So I would answer it by saying the current system is broken and it's not going to be fixed. We have too much debt. We can't pay it off. The only options we have are massive hyperinflation, think Venezuela, or defaulting. We are the US reserve currency for the world. I don't know a scenario under which we could default. So we need another system. And I think because when I get asked that, I talk about that. And then I say, I don't like TikTok. I don't like it. When I first went on it, I thought it was a channel for people who like twerking because that's all I ever saw. I'm like, what is this thing? I don't want to be on this thing. But I like to go on it now. It's sad and depressing. But go on TikTok and you see video after video after video. People seem to make them in their cars most of the time, which is odd. Yeah. It's all these young people saying, I work 2 jobs. I'm living with my parents. Why? What is wrong? And crying and saying, what else do I have to do here? I'm never going to own a house. That's why Bitcoin matters, because they are stuck in a system that they did not create. We all are. And it gets to a point where you can't get ahead of it. As the inflation keeps going up and going up and going up, you're a hamster on a wheel. You can only work so many hours. And because of AI and technology, wages are going to continue to deflate. The dollar is going to continue to deflate. So that's why it's important. And try to get some of the early Bitcoin books. There's one that's free on Amazon, and it's called, I think it's called Don't Fuck with Bitcoin or something. It has the F word in the title. It's great. It's a primer on Bitcoin. Most people aren't going to read Safe and Moose's books. They're very technical. The Bitcoin Standard. I mean, if your friends are interested and really want to read it, a lot of us have probably read it. I've read it. That's a great book. The Fiat Standard is a great book. But go in and get your friends, try to get them interested in some of what people are saying on crypto Twitter, the early videos on YouTube. That's a great book too. Yeah, that's a really good book. There's lots of articles. But I guess, when people say to you, well, why does this matter? Say, well, how are you doing financially? Are you doing better than you were a couple years ago? And is that because of something dramatic that happened? Or is it because inflation is destroying your net worth and your purchasing power? So that's where the rubber seems to hit the road with people, is when they say, yeah, eggs have gone up 400%, but my salary didn't go up 400%. I still got the same number of kids. I still got the same mortgage, if not higher. And it's real now. I think a lot of people are realizing it's real. This is not just some economic theory.
What do they think with AI mixed in with all the crypto?
We don't know yet, really. AI is so new. They're going to have a lot of regulatory battles there. And my own personal view is I'm really glad people like Elon Musk are talking about safety and ethics of AI. I think Congress is going to get very involved in that, the ethics of it. It is technology. It's very hard trained to stop. I did talk with Fred Thiel. He's the CEO of Marathon, which is, I think, the largest Bitcoin miner in America now. And we've known each other for many years. And we talked at the Bitcoin conference. And I said, are you guys mining? Are you setting up data centers that will mine for AI companies? He said, no, because AI is different functionality. They share similar computing standards, but it's a totally different thing. They're more setting up data centers that will help to balance out the energy grid. So we don't really know about AI yet.
And if we want to connect with you, can we do that?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, Jackie Price. I'm on LinkedIn. Price, like the price of eggs, price of Bitcoin. Well, not usually. Sometimes. Did you have a question too?
No, you made me think of the stadium of students at that graduation ceremony that responded to the whatever the valedictorian speech when you mentioned the Bitcoin. I was curious what you thought about that and what kind of reveals about the state of our system.
I was really depressed when I saw that, but then a friend of mine said something to me. I think it was at the guy from the chamber when we were up there a few days before the conference getting ready, and we all watched it. And, he's so astute. I didn't think of this. He said, Jackie, you were on TV. He said, the only people that you can hear booing are these people in this one little section. He said, the whole stadium wasn't booing. And he said, it's that one guy got it started. And, his graduation, they probably all had a few. And everybody's like, oh, Bitcoin sucks. But, there's haters going to hate. And I think there's a lot of people who are saying, when Bitcoin hits 100, it's just human behavior, right? I don't want it when it's, 2,000, but God, I want it when it's 100,000. It's FOMO. So, and there are always going to be people who don't feel comfortable with it, which is one reason why I'd never talk to my friends about it. If they want to talk about it, that's fine, but I don't bring it up because, money, I was raised, you don't ask anybody who they voted for or about money or religion. And, people will come to it who want to, and those that don't, that's cool too. Some people like gold, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No need to read in a greater indictment against Big Ed.
I don't think so. I teach a class at University of Florida, and I just took a little survey of my class because we're going to do a little project. My class is about innovation communications, how to bring things to market that no one's ever heard of, which is a lot of what I've done in my career. And so I said, how many people in this room out of 18 have Bitcoin? I think it was 6 have digital assets. About 6 or 7 raised their hands. And I said, how many of you guys have so it was less than half. How many of you have Bitcoin? And it was 2. And I said to the others, well, what do you guys have? Oh, I got Dogecoin. I got this meme coin. I got that meme coin. And that's fine. Part of this is them learning about all of this stuff, right? I mean, I'm sure I invested in stupid things when I was young, and maybe some of those things aren't so stupid. We don't know. But the commonality on that age group, and I have niece and nephew that are a little older than that, and they talk about it, and they invest in Bitcoin, and I match them a little bit. The commonality is they all know something is wrong with the monetary system. They all know something's wrong with the money because a lot of them are about to walk out of school with some serious debt. And that's the thing that, whether it's DC people or Florida people, whatever, a lot of us that work in the industry truly, That's what drives us, is we cannot leave the system to our kids, our niece, our nephew, our grandchildren. We can't. They won't be able to sustain it. And that's what drives a lot of us. And I worked in tech for a long, long time. And one thing I love about this industry is people are so optimistic. They're so collaborative. Even our competitor association, we talk to those guys a lot. And we share resources and we say, you guys are better at this stuff with the NFTs. Why don't we send these people to you? And, we want as an industry to succeed because we want people to have better lives. And that sounds like really kind of silly, but that is what it is about for most people in this industry. Even hardcore lobbyists in DC, they'll tell you, listen, I got kids. They're walking out with $40,000, $50,000 in debt. And they're going to be living in my house for the next 5 years. Like, they get it. So anyway, I encourage you to try to bring your friends, if nothing else, bring them to these meetups, support these local guys. They need it more than we need it in DC.
So guys, we have a Discord that we encourage you to join. If you ever have questions, ongoing, questions, and as you go deeper, with your research, you might come across a few, there's all kinds of traps out there, right? So we encourage you to share any thoughts and ideas you have there before you pull the trigger, right? Don't ever send Bitcoin to anybody that prompts you online, right? But just use it as a resource, as a local community. We want a circular Bitcoin economy. And if you're ever looking to acquire more Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin because you need to pay, for an asset, whatever it may be, it's good for that. It's bringing it local.
Yeah, for sure. And, maybe this group of 10 people says, okay, we're going to have a goal. Next time we come, we're each going to bring one person with us. Then it's 20. Then it's 40. Then you guys set up a little GoFundMe to help these guys have more conferences. I'm not trying to but I went to Bitcoin Day in Miami and it was amazing. It was fantastic. I felt so privileged to be there. And how many were there? 200? Something like that?
In Miami?
Yeah.
I wish.
100?
There was about 100. Yes.
Right. So next time we should have 200. There's no reason you can't. And you guys set up a crowdfund and help them pay for it. Because, that's how this stuff works. And we all have $10 or $20 here or there. And that's where this is going to take off.
It's really, to me, it's about empowering the individual, right? That's
100%.
Ones that Jack was talking about, the kids, I have kids and grandkids who are struggling to make ends meet. And there's not just kids out there. There's lots of people out there in this world who are struggling to make ends meet. And if they understand that there's an ability to have a savings technology that will actually grow in value over time, and they don't have to have a degree in finance in order to make it work or be a day trader in order to make it work, that gives them, it empowers them to put back some of that money into the currency, into that savings technology that will increase in purchasing power over time.
Right. And it's interesting because we've been trying to collect stories from around the world too about use cases and stuff. And we did some internal research recently, and we are finding that the biggest adopters of Bitcoin right now are not the wealthy. It's middle class, very high numbers of African Americans and Hispanics, and poor people who are in poverty, buying $10 a week or whatever, because that's their option, right? And the other thing we found out about was things that are kind of interesting, like we had a person that came to speak to us at the summit, and she's a national advocate in Washington for battered and abused women. And she said, we are really encouraging women in shelters and people who call shelters to put money in Bitcoin, because what they find is that when a woman flees or has to flee, or say the man is arrested and can get out of the house, she often leaves with what she has in her purse and her kids if she has them. The bank accounts get shut off, the credit cards get shut off by the partner or the husband. They leave literally with what they have in their purse. So they're saying, memorize these 12 words or carry a card with you, whatever you have to do, put some money in Bitcoin so you leave with something. And that happened in Afghanistan. We found out about a school in Afghanistan. It's been covered in the news now, where there were, I think, 14 women that when Afghanistan fell and we left, a lot of these schools that were set up for girls and women were immediate targets of the Taliban. And so there was a very famous school over there, and they knew they were probably going to be killed. They got most of the women there. A lot of them had Bitcoin. They knew this might happen someday. So they had Bitcoin. They put their little numbers in there. They memorized them, or some of them had pieces of paper in the bottom of their shoes, and they got to London and Paris, and they had money. They could rent an apartment. They had a way to live. So this is serious stuff for a lot of people. There are many people in the world who live in societies that will take your money or lock you out of your bank account like that. And that's, so it has real world implications for people, for sure.
As you were speaking earlier, I was thinking, why isn't there an organization, meant for Bitcoin for women?
Uh-huh.
Because women really truly don't understand it like a man would get it.
Yes.
Women has to be handheld,
Yes.
explained over and over and over.
Yes.
Just share.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. You sure don't look it.
With mortgage, lost everything and had to start over at almost 60 years old, past 60. And that's why another reason why I had to work. So women do not understand money. I talk to women all the time.
They do not.
About money. I talk to them about Bitcoin, about gold, silver, about having their own money. There are so many women that have no idea that a lot of them that have husbands don't even handle the books.
Yeah.
And it's very sad.
Yeah.
I was thrust into it.
Right.
But,
Right.
We need to help.
This is it's a huge point. It's a huge point because it is still statistically well known that in most households, women manage the spending, but men manage the running of the finances and the investing. And there's a wonderful gal called Natalie Brunell. Have you heard? You should follow her. She's fantastic. She does some work with us at the chamber. She narrated a documentary we did. She's young. She could be on TV. She explains Bitcoin very simply, and she does a lot with women's community. At the Bitcoin Miami big conference and the one in Nashville this year, she started a Bitcoin for Women brunch, and she's a big advocate for women in Bitcoin. And for those in the room, men or women, if you say, okay, let's bring somebody next time, try to bring a woman, because it's true. I've been in this industry a long time, and up until 2 or 3 years ago, it was not uncommon that I'd walk into rooms and it's me and 500 guys and maybe one other woman or 2 other women. And I don't mind that. I've worked in tech for years, so I'm kind of used to it. But it is time that we all get involved here. And the other people that are not really involved, I don't think enough, are seniors, because they're afraid of technology.
Okay, going beyond just last
I can
question.
stay for a couple of minutes.
Going beyond money, I like Bitcoin because it's a time span.
Mm-hmm.
So you can develop a lot of things based on this technology. And what I'm sad of is that because there's no regulation, I can't develop anything on top of this phenomenal technology. Right? For the 7 years past, I've been trying to develop them. I'm always scared. Okay, if I do this, what's going to happen to me? And I have a lot of friends who are developing in Malta, in Gibraltar, in Hong Kong, in Cayman Islands, because they cannot develop here.
You can develop on Lightning, and you can develop on L2 and L3.
Until the ETFs, it was always a very scary thing to be developing on any blockchain.
Yeah, Yeah, you can develop on testnet. And there's a lot of projects on GitHub.
About real things, like,
Testnet
you know,
is real.
I really want
Yeah.
I think on that blockchain because of the timestamp, it's phenomenal. You know, you can send yourself, take a picture of the document, your will, for example, send it to yourself through the Bitcoin and timestamp. Nobody can.
Most of those applications are going to be probably chain agnostic to some degree, right? I'm a little out of my depth because I'm not an engineer, but from a strategy standpoint, where like as a mortgage broker, where you're going to have your opportunities, I would guess, is in the tokenization of assets.
Yeah.
And now that doesn't necessarily require Bitcoin. You don't have to build on the Bitcoin. A lot of those projects are being built on ETH.
You got the ones that change their governance.
Yeah.
You know, people ask.
A lot of projects are being built on Ethereum though that are tokenized.
Yes.
Yeah. And now we have the ETF. There's a great new book that just came out. I'm only about halfway through it called The Tokenization of Everything. You might want to check it out. It's pretty cool. They talk about real estate a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you know things take some time, but GitHub and all the testnet, there's loads of projects on there.
And there's large communities out there that offer free courses to build on as well.
Yeah, but it's not about the free code, it's about having the legal framework.
Yeah, but those are all legally compliant.
Sandbox.
Yeah.
If you want to operate within DeFi, unfortunately in the US, you have to comply with regulations. So they're not going to allow you to have American citizens participate unless you KYC and follow the regulatory guidance, right? So that's the issue. Us in crypto space, we don't always want to disclose our identity, right? We want that layer of privacy. And so therefore, we oftentimes operate outside of, we operate off decentralized exchanges, which the US is now coming after, like.
How many decentralized exchanges can you, as a US citizen, operate or get into in the United States?
You can't.
Correct. And the thing, well, that doesn't mean you can't build layer 2 and layer 3 projects on Ethereum and other Solana and other chains, right?
Name one in the United States that works, that's being developed here.
Base.
There's Coinbase. It's not a decentralized exchange. Right?
Coinbase is
essential.
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, from the Washington perspective, from the national perspective, this is we are the financial hub of the world. The impact that Sam Bankman-Fried had on this industry, I cannot describe to you guys how horrendous that, whether it was inside job or nobody knows, we'll probably never. But we don't know. There were people very, very concerned a couple of years ago that the whole industry might, be very severely affected. And it's thanks to a couple of cool heads prevailing in Washington and a lot of as much as people have their issues with Coinbase and Kraken and the very exchanges, I mean, those guys were able to stand up and say, yeah, we don't have that here. That doesn't happen on our platforms. And they had to go through the hoops that those companies had to go through for to be listed on the NASDAQ. Oh my God. I don't know as much about that, but I know about what the public miners went through. It was unbelievable what they went through. So, these are the rules of the road, and they'll change over time too. I'm curious to see what happens with tokenization of assets. I think that's really going to take. No, it's quite good, and it's pretty easy. Tokenization of everything. It's a little technical, but you could get through it.
You have to have a strong blockchain.
Yes, for sure.
And that's what the only one is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The only one.
And well, and there's I don't know as much about Solana and Uniswap and those, but there's a lot of investment in those, and there's a lot of people behind those things. And it's like a lot of us in this room were around when the internet kind of became a big thing in the mid 90s. And I can remember people saying, well, it's, we're just going to be able to read these weird messages. And then Amazon came along. Well, okay, you could buy a book. And that's what people thought it was going to be. Yeah. And it's sort of like, we don't know where this is going to go, but I think it's going far and wide. And there's interesting things happening. I'm personally intrigued by Chainlink because I understand oracles, and I think the need to connect on-chain and off-chain data is going to be really important. Not to suggest anyone buy it, but there's all that stuff too, and we have to kind of see where it takes us. Elon Musk will probably think of some other thing that none of us have ever thought of before. I want to thank you guys for having me. It is my honor to be with you. And I'm so grateful when I'm asked to come and speak. Not that I know that much, but it is truly an honor to be with you guys. And we're all part of the same community. So please help these guys. Bring your friends.
We are with this big lobbying company, but the group out there, it's a way for us to go through you guys and do something out there.
For sure. For sure.
Before I lose everyone's attention, you notice that we're filming. We have been filming more recently, and everything's getting posted on this YouTube channel, Consensus Protocol, YouTube at Consensus Protocol, right? And or you can follow us on X at Consensus Pro and all the videos. So Jackie mentioned Bitcoin Day Miami. We were able to record everything there, so those videos are all up and posted. So all this great content, if you want to share with your friends, you can't get them to come here, and you think that this was a great talk tonight, soon we'll have at least bits and pieces of it posted up there, and you can share it with your friends that way. All right? Yeah. So thank you, Jackie.
Thank you guys for having me. That'll be fun.